Good afternoon, good morning, everybody. Welcome to Soho House, to the live stream of an interview with Nirav and Jim McKelvey. I'd like to thank you all for being here today. I know it's a hot day outside, and thank all of those online for the first time through YouTube. I think, when we think about success, and we have two unicorn founders here, I like to think of it as, although they're apparently extinct, I like to think about it as an iceberg. The glory sits above the water, but all the hard work, toil, insecurities, challenges, personal and professional, form the mass of the greater mass of the iceberg. And it's that we'd like to focus on today with Nirav and Jim. Like many in the room, I've also founded a business, and I understand the stresses that it takes. And so I'm extra pleased to be here with Jim and Nirav. They don't take any introduction, but I'll give you one anyway. Jim was the founder of Square. He's currently the founder and CEO of Invisibly. He's a serial entrepreneur. He's founded more than 7 companies in his time, probably more by now, I think. He's an author, and he's had a varied career. He started as an artist, glassblower.
Glassblower.
Yep. Went into entrepreneurship. He then retired from entrepreneurship, became a glassblower again. Then went back into entrepreneurship to start Square with a 15-year-old intern that you met called...
Jack Dorsey. Jack was my summer intern.
Yeah.
So.
Nirav, great to have you here. Nirav,
I feel terrible having to follow the glassblower here.
I know.
That's a tough one to follow.
So Nirav, founder and former CEO of Nextdoor, which I'm sure you're all familiar with. Previously COO and helped grow shopping.com. If he looks familiar, it's because he's also on Shark Tank in the USA quite frequently. I think there are a few sharks and dragons circulating around the campus today. And he's currently executive chairman of Head of Sophia. So thank you both for being here.
Thank you for having us.
So wanted to dig in. Let's get to the meat of it. So I think both of you look depressingly young and healthy and relaxed for the success that you've had. So it's a good segue into how you think about balance. Is balance something that you can achieve when you're building a company, or is it something you sacrifice at the altar of success? So I know you've had some interesting thoughts, and we've discussed it in the past, Nirav, so maybe do you want to start with that?
Sure, and I loved what you said about the iceberg, because I have heard success defined as 999 failures leading to one success. And so, that really is the truth about making one of these things work. And probably the reason that we look so good is because we are not in the middle of trying to make one of these things work, or maybe you are.
Yeah, ex-CEO was the best thing about your intro.
Yeah, exactly.
Former
Former
CEO.
But let's use that to segue into balance. I never had much balance when I was running companies. Nextdoor was the 3rd one that I had started and run as CEO, and over that 20-year stretch, I felt like focus and work ethic and a single-minded dedication was a competitive advantage, and was something that I required to be successful in what I was doing. Ultimately, when I had the chance to step back, and at the time I had a 5-year-old, a 3-year-old, and a 1-year-old son, I really found this incredible gift of being able to shift all of that focus into my family. Now, my kids would probably say that I'm not balanced now either, and I'm working them just as hard as I was working at the company. But I think balance is not really possible when you're running a company or building a business. I think there are seasons, however, and if you think about a sine curve, there are times when you really have to grind, and there are times where maybe you can take a step back. So I think it's more about life-work harmony, and you have to have an honest conversation about yourself regarding, is this the time in my life when I want to do everything I need to do to build a successful business, which requires sacrifices and compromises in the other parts of your life? Or is it a season or an era in one's life when you can focus on other things?
Right.
And so I couldn't really do 50% personal, 50% professional. When I was doing professional, it was like 120%.
Yeah.
But now that I'm able to not do 120%, professional, I can focus a little bit more on the personal.
But at the time, did you know that it was going to change? Did you see a light at the end of the tunnel? Or
I was pretty tired. I mean, if I'm honest with myself, I mean, when I stepped down from Nextdoor, I'd been running it for about 10 years. And I was pretty tired, and I was not as sharp as I think I needed to be to guide the company through its next stage. Sarah Fryer, who runs the company now, incredible executive, incredible operator, and the company was at a point where it was about to go to the next level. It was preparing to go public. It was going from hundreds of employees to thousands, and there was a lot of value in bringing someone on who was at the very beginning of that adventure, versus I felt like I was dragging myself to the end of mine.
Right. Now, before Jim answers, I should say that Nirav's just arrived from the airport. I spoke to Jim about briefing yesterday, and he said he didn't want to know any of the questions, so I can guarantee you original content here. So let's see what happens.
Yeah, and it's going to be bad content because I have to agree with you. And usually, like, conflict is good on stage. But look, generally, I've not been able to achieve balance either. I tend to work single-mindedly on something, or I task switch between projects. I find that I believe that people can have balance. I've met people who claim to. I just don't have any personal experience. So if you want this sort of life equation from me, it's not that. What I found is that I can do different things, and that sort of synthesizes balance. Which
simultaneously?
Is, no, like, so I'll go into the glass studio and I'll work there, and the process of physically making an object, it's just a different set of skills. But when I'm in the glass studio, like, I can't even hear people talking to me. I'll be sometimes so focused on the piece. But then, when I'm doing something that I care about, and I definitely, deeply cared about what Square was doing, that's a singular focus. And I actually left Square when my son was born, because it was pretty clear to me that 14-hour days were not going to lead to a good family life. Right. So, sorry for the balance enthusiasts.
And then when you come to, you've just touched on it, people start businesses for different reasons. It's sometimes because you want to get somewhere, success, money, things you don't have. It's to solve a problem. It's an irritation. Jim, I know that Square was founded because somebody couldn't buy one of your art pieces.
Yes.
So once you, with an Amex, once you achieve what you've been driving towards, how does your motivation change?
In my case, it kind of disappears.
Right.
Like, once the problem's solved, I am then uninterested in the process, which is why I don't run companies. So somebody like Sarah Fryer, who will just sing her praises since she's not here. Sarah was great. Jack was great. Jack and I had literally a 15-minute conversation about who was going to run the company. He's like, I want to run the company. I was like, great. I don't want to run the company. And I'm like, well, what are we going to do with the rest of the time that we've set up for this meeting? And that was it. It's very clear to me that I'm not good when I stop caring about the problem. And in my case, I always focus on problems that I have not been able to find any sort of societal solution for.
Yeah.
So if somebody else is working on the problem, I'm like, great, Nirav is going to handle this. I'll go do something else, or do nothing. But that's once it's from 0 to 1, to use sort of Peter Thiel's analogy, I very quickly lose interest.
Yeah. That's and Nirav?
Well, I think it's really important, I mean, as Jim just said, to have an honest conversation with yourself about what is motivating you. And the benefit for us of reflecting on the past is that in retrospect, we can say, well, why was I doing that exactly? And you can learn a lot about yourself. But you can do that in the moment as well. So we talked earlier about saying, okay, I look in the mirror and I say, is this an era of my life where I'm going to sell out to build my company, or I am going to focus on my family? The same way, looking in the mirror and saying, why am I doing this? Yeah. Is it because I want to achieve financial freedom? Is it because this is a really thorny problem that I'm passionate about solving? I lived a sort of charmed life as a founder and CEO, which is I went to Stanford and was in Silicon Valley when all of these people were starting amazing companies, getting fabulously wealthy, and changing the world and truly impacting it in a positive way. And that was inspirational for me. So the idea for me of being able to work on something that would make the world better at scale that was something I saw. I was one of the earliest employees at Yahoo. Those of you who remember Yahoo, it was many, many, many years ago, back in 1996. I was employee 84 there, and I got to see how that dramatically improved the quality of people's lives. It not only made people money, but it really made the world better. And so impact was the thing that I was really seeking. And part of the reason that ultimately it made sense for Sarah Fryer to come and run Nextdoor instead of me is because that company had the potential and has the potential and is making the world a better place at scale. And we needed the best possible person to do that. And so my motivation was less, I got to take this company public, I have to make X amount of money, I need to make sure we have 100 million daily active users. And it was much more, I want to make sure that the thing that I've created, the thing that I've poured so much of my life into, will have the most impact. Right. And impact for me, as I transitioned out, became maybe the most important startup of them all, which was the startup of my family. Yeah. How can I have a positive impact on my children and have a positive impact as a father, as a husband, as a relative to my family members that I'd largely ignored over the last 20 years, right? And so knowing your motivation is a good way to ensure that you won't wake up one day and say, wait, why did I do all of this? Yeah. Why did I make all of these sacrifices? And it's important to have that conversation. I love what Jim said about needing to solve a problem, because then there's no guilt. If he says to himself, okay, I started this amazing thing Square, but I'm okay walking away now because the problem that inspired me to be part of it in the first place is something that is solved or something that no longer resonates with me, right? And having that kind of honest conversation is ultimately, I think, very, very critical.
And on the subject that you touched on an important point, but on the subject of honesty and self-reflection and being honest with yourself, is that something that you have to do on a daily basis, reflect, is this project working? I know there'll be many founders here today who are questioning the viability of their business, when to walk away. Is that something that runs through everything you do? Brutal self-honesty.
No, that's what my wife is for. My job is to maintain a happy state of delusion so I can get up and try again. Look, the stuff that I work on is weird. It is, I work on things that don't work. And so you'll see, well, they took my name badge away, but I'm working at a company called Invisibly right now. Invisibly we've been at it for 6 years. Yeah. We think it's going to work. Download it in 2 weeks. Give us 2 weeks. We need 2 weeks. We got one more feature to come in. It's starting to work, but you know, it's very difficult because we're working on something that historically has always failed. And you know, just like I believe somebody's going to crack Fusion, you know, probably in some other tent right now, they're talking about how close we are to getting Fusion working. You know, I hope they do. I believe it's going to be great for the world. But it's very frustrating for me to do what I do. Yeah. So I don't believe that pure rationality would help me. Yeah. I think I have to believe it can be done. Yes. And then if I maintain that positive delusion, as long as I can do that, I keep going. Once I give up, which does happen, it just happens less often than I think normal, then I quit and drink.
I know I'm supposed to disagree, but I am going to agree with Jim on this one. I mean, when you're in the middle of it...
There's a bar in here.
And, yeah.
You can't see this on YouTube, but there's alcohol that direction.
When you're in the boiler room, I don't think it's very easy to do this self-reflection and, you know, get to this higher plane of consciousness. Yeah. Now, if you're lucky enough to have a wife or a husband, you get a cold, hard dose of truth every night when you go home. If you join something like YPO, Young Presidents Organization, it can be a kind of support group of CEOs and founders that are giving each other a dose of reality. I found that most of the time, you can't really reflect until it's over, which is actually, it's too bad, right? Because you'd like to have that wisdom and you'd like to have that awareness. But in reality, when you're in it, you need every possible piece of energy that you have going towards solving that impossible problem. Because by definition, you're trying to do something that hasn't been done before.
Yes. Well, but let's distinguish, okay? Most problems are solved problems. So if you want to start a fintech SaaS company, that is a solved problem. I've got a VC fund that will fund that and give you the formula, okay? Most problems that humans face on a daily basis have been solved by other humans. And you'd be an idiot not to find somebody else who solved it and copy their solution in most cases. And that includes starting companies. And this is a problem I ran into when I wrote the innovation stack, which is I was writing this book on all these companies that had this really weird phenomenon, which made them sort of super durable.
Yeah.
And the commonality that I found was that they couldn't copy other business models. They were forced to. They didn't choose to. They were forced to build something new. But that's very different. So I don't want people to go out and go, oh, I want to, solve a new problem. No. Go on YouTube. Look it up. Click off this video right now and go search for some other idiot that invested all this time experimenting until he found something that worked. And then copy that, if you can. But there are certain problems that haven't been solved. And if you're confronting one of those, then you end up forced to innovate. And I say forced to because people are sold this bill of goods with innovation, like, oh, it's really cool to be an innovator. No, it sucks. It completely sucks because you face failure because you're trying stuff that is not likely to work.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, you wouldn't go to Vegas. You wouldn't go to Vegas and play a game where the odds are 199 against you.
Yes.
But picking an unsolved problem is essentially doing that.
Well, that makes sense. And Jim, I think that sort of defensive moat that's built through innovation, you did that with Square, and you used that in the battle with Amazon, right? Or
yes, it protected us. So Amazon copied Square when we were a startup, and when Amazon attacks a startup, they win 100% of the time. This was true up until Square.
Yeah.
And when we survived, miraculously, afterwards, I was very happy. We were all very happy. But it was amazing because we didn't do anything differently. We wanted to fight Amazon, so we went on looking for other companies that had beat Amazon, discovered there were none. And then the question was, well, what the hell do we do? And the answer is, well, we'd love to be as strong as Amazon. We can't be. We'd love to have Amazon's brand name. We don't have it. We'd love to have Amazon's bank account. We don't have it. We'd love to have a listening device in everybody's home. We don't have that. Like, Amazon had all these advantages that we didn't have, so we couldn't do anything except what we were already doing, and it worked. So the question was why?
Yeah, well, why?
Well, the answer, which I'll save you 300 pages of reading, we couldn't copy because what we were doing at the time was building credit card acceptance for guys like me and my friends who were dirty artists and guys with no credit rating and in some cases ankle bracelets and like it's a gritty crowd in the glass studio and we're not very happy. The bankers are not happy to see us wander in. Okay, so when we tried to build Square, we realized that the entire financial system, unbeknownst to us, had this like invisible wall that walled off all of my buddies. So when we tried to build a system to enable normal people to get paid, we broke 17 laws. Like that's how it started. I don't know if the camera's on. That we may have talked about that before. The camera was on.
I think the camera was not on.
Well, the camera was on. So before, that's always when the best stuff happens. We were talking about how many laws we broke at Square with our first product. We got the product built in 3 weeks.
Yeah.
It took us a year and a half to get legal, and in some cases we had to have laws changed in order to make it possible.
Wow.
So because we couldn't copy, Square was forced to invent all sorts of new stuff. Just like a bunch of other companies, throughout history, which I study in the book, who had this amazing phenomenon where, because they couldn't copy, they were forced to innovate. And when you innovate, there is a totally different rule set. And this is the thing. This is why I love people like Sarah Fryer. The rules that Sarah follows are rules of known business. They're execution. She knows how to build it. She knows how to make it better. She knows how to IP. She runs this thing, okay? In the world of invention, there's sort of a different set of rules that we don't even talk about in the English language because we don't even have a word to describe a person in business who is doing something differently.
Yeah.
Like the word entrepreneur used to have that definition 150 years ago. That definition has now morphed to anyone who starts a business is an entrepreneur. Start a coffee shop, you're an entrepreneur. But I've seen other coffee shops, okay? There's a model for a coffee shop. There's a trade show where you can go to and learn how to build a coffee shop, right? And if you don't know how to do it, you could hire somebody else from somebody else's coffee shop and they'll come in and tell you. try to build something that hasn't been done before, and there is no trade show, there are no experts, and you're forced to innovate.
Well, Nirav, you did it as well with your business, and really, I think it was driven by finding out that very few Americans knew their neighbors, their neighborhoods as well. So was that the trigger for you?
Yeah, and look, necessity is the mother of invention. I mean, that's essentially what he's saying, right? And as the true definition of the word entrepreneur, if you have no choice, you will do what you have to do to survive, or you'll die.
Yeah.
Which is what most companies do. They die, right? And so the origin story of Nextdoor is interesting for a couple of reasons. One is we were in the midst of working on my second company that I founded, and it was failing. And so in terms of thinking about, all right, what are we going to do to innovate around this? We innovated so extremely that we changed the business itself into something different that became Nextdoor. The other thing we looked at the time...
What was it before?
It was a company that was completely unrelated. It was called Fanbase, which was a user-generated content site that was trying to take on ESPN. We were trying to build a fan-centric version of ESPN, the sports network, and it was not working. It was failing, and so we changed completely. But there was Facebook, to the point about Amazon, Facebook already existed. Facebook already had unchecked virality. Facebook was already well on its way to 1 billion plus users. And so we were forced to do something different. If we had not done something different, we would not have survived. We weren't building another Facebook. We had to look at something that was completely different, that would force us to do completely different things. For example, Nextdoor was founded on this principle of verified addresses and real names, which seems sort of passé now, but 10 years ago, this was a completely novel thing, and people told us, well, how are you going to verify everyone's name and address? That's a crazy idea. Yes. That makes no sense. And it didn't make any sense, and it was a crazy idea, but it's what we were forced to do, and if we wouldn't have done it, the company never would have gotten off the ground.
And taking it back a step, I mean, you touched on it earlier, away from the company and back to the personal. Both of you mentioned that having a child changed your lives, changed your decision-making. How do you think about that? How did that happen? Many of our clients, entrepreneurs themselves, this is the biggest challenge they face, bigger than founding their business, is how do I instill a sense of grit and determination and purpose, should you wish to do that, in your children, and basically keep them normal? So
we had a second child so we could run A/B testing. And look, I don't know. I've met a lot of really messed up kids who grew up wealthy, and I'm terrified that my kids can Google, the family net worth. And I've told them that they aren't getting it. And my wife is right now giving away all our money, and that's our plan. Like, all of it. Screw it. And by the way, I don't give away any of it. Talk to my wife. But no, seriously.
This guy wants to be mobbed at the end of this
No,
thing, right?
I'm not. It's all up for grabs, and Anna's in control. So good luck finding her. She doesn't have any.
I've heard there are many universities with your name.
She has an unpronounceable last name. Good luck finding her. But here's the thing. It's a very serious question, but the problem is, there are different parenting theories. There are different parenting environments. Do your best. You see if you're right in 20 years, So I think the best that I can do is, try to be present. That seems to correlate with, good parenting. And so don't work all the time. But also work because I think, one of the things about being in the position where you don't actually have to go work for a living is that it's easy to sort of indulge in just fun stuff, and you can do that. That's good, but I think it's also important to at least have somewhat of a culture of work in the family. And I don't know if that's good, but it seems to correlate with like people who like the most interesting person to me is somebody who was raised really wealthy and is not just a total dickwad. Right. That's my.
We're going to get censored on YouTube now.
So.
First time ever on YouTube, and we're going to be taken off. But that's good. It was a good comment.
There's
anyway.
There's a better way to say it. But
what's the word?
Jerk.
Jerk.
A jerk. Someone who isn't a jerk.
Yeah. No, but I mean like.
And Nirav, I'm sorry, we're running low on time. Nirav, your thoughts as well? Does that correlate?
I agree. I'll go back to what you said, which is, having a kid when you're running a company. I mean, your company, to some extent, is your kid. And so what I found was being present, which I felt was absolutely critical
Yes.
about being a good parent, was difficult for me to do when I was running a company.
Yeah.
And it was a lot easier when I wasn't. At the same time, what Jim said is absolutely true. When I woke up this morning and left, we were in Florence, Italy, and flew here for the conference, my kids said, "Daddy, do you really have to go?" And I said, "Yeah, Daddy's got to go work." And they looked at me and said, "Well, Daddy doesn't work." I said, "Well, yes, Daddy does work, as a matter of fact. And before you were born, Daddy only worked, right?" But it's really important because you want to teach them not only with what you say,
Yeah.
but with what you do.
Yeah.
And the number one piece of advice I got was the one that Jim shared, which is you have to be around your kids. And yes, you'll tell them to do this and you'll tell them to do that, but ultimately you have to show them, and you have to show them with your own actions
Yeah.
that aren't contrived,
Yeah.
right? It's
Authenticity.
got to be natural
Yeah.
and authentic.
Excellent. I'm getting signs from behind the camera that we're running out of time, so thank you both, Jim, Nirav. Really, really interesting talk, and thank you all for being here again.
Thanks for having us.